Hello and welcome to the Way of the Illuminated Warrior Global Summit. My name is Perry Finkelstein, also known as Waska, and it's with great pleasure that I bring this series to you, hosting some incredible, mindful experts who are going to share with you their wisdom to help and to heal and to grow into your fullest potential. So before I introduce today's guest, I'd like to share a little bit about my story and intentions behind this. Like so many other young guys, I grew up in an environment that didn't really support male role models to help me on my journey into manhood. I suffered from religious bias, bullying at school, and living in an alcoholic family also had its challenges, of course. So I was fortunate along the way to meet some really wonderful, beautiful people who helped me to find balance and my worthiness and my true potential, and to feel good about my life and what I'm putting out there. And that's what this summit is about, to offer the same for other people, to hear what the wisdom is of our guests. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's guest. Patrick Paul Garlinger is a writer on spirituality and human consciousness, as well as a conscious and intuitive channel. He's a former Spanish teacher of literature who specialized in gender and queer theory. Patrick graduated magna cum laude from New York School of Law. His discovery of spirituality began over a decade ago with meditation and yoga. And starting in 2010, he experienced a powerful spiritual awakening that led him to his teacher, a renowned international healer who he apprenticed with for many years. Patrick has published three works of spiritual wisdom and is currently working on his fourth channeled book. He currently resides in New York City, where he teaches meditation, leads workshops on a variety of spiritual topics, and works with individual clients to release the past and open to the truth of who they are. So welcome, Patrick.
Thank you so much, Waska. So great to be here.
Yes, it's great to have you, and thank you for joining us. And I think it would be really great to start off if you'd like to share a little bit about your story and how you found your path and your divine purpose in doing what you're doing.
Oh, I'd love to talk about that. So like many people, I kind of at an early age sensed that there was sort of more to life than what I could sort of see and sense and taste. But I really had no guidance. At a very early age, I had a pretty traumatic religious experience, which is that I grew up in, there was a point where I was living in Utah, and I was in like first grade, and the kids wouldn't play with me. And I didn't understand why. And I remember saying to the teacher, they won't play with me. And she looked at them and said, well, why won't you play with him? And they said, well, he's Catholic. And she looked down and I could just see her, and she goes, it's not his fault. And I remember at an early age, just this moment of like this rupture that said, okay, if this is what God is about, I want nothing to do with it. So for most of my life, I was really wedded to logic and reason, and completely refused any kind of spiritual path. It all seemed like it was just wishful thinking to me. And so slowly but surely what happened is that over time I began to do certain practices. I discovered yoga. I discovered yoga when I was at a gym, like when I was like a big brawny gym, and they offered a yoga class called Power Yoga. I thought, okay, that's good for me. Power through. It couldn't have been anything else. It had to be power yoga. And lo and behold, I didn't realize I was actually studying with a very sophisticated Ashtanga teacher who just didn't describe everything in its typical Sanskrit terms. It just, she led us through things in a way that was accessible to us. And that led to meditation. And then slowly but surely led to meeting my teacher.
Well, wonderful.
Yeah.
So growing up, in my experience, a lot of us young boys and through that process have, as I said earlier, not really had the best or healthiest male role models to help us along the journey. So, what was your experience like growing up, and who were your role models that if there are any, were any that helped you to get to the place that you're at now?
Yeah. Yeah, like you, I had a childhood that definitely where there was an absence of male role models. My father divorced my mother when I was 10, and that was a very traumatic moment in my life where I did not understand the separation at all. And my father and I, along with my siblings, we continued to have a relationship, but he was pretty absent in my life. It was our connection was very episodic, and when it was short-lived. And so I didn't really have a lot of male role models. And as I look back in my life, most of the people I gravitated to were sort of strong female teachers. My mother remarried, and my stepfather came in, and that was initially very difficult. One of the things I had assumed was kind of the male role model. I took over and took care of my siblings and kind of felt like I was the man of the house. And he became something of a role model just in terms of really helping me to lower my barriers. I was very closed, didn't want him in, and it was that was a sort of first role model. But it wasn't really until graduate school, many, many years later, when I was doing a PhD in Spanish literature, which you alluded to, that I met somebody who really had a sense of who he was, and just a very giving mentor, somebody who, to me, really embodied kind of this wonderful balance of being very self-aware, had a lot of presence, and at the same time, sort of deeply compassionate and wanting to really guide and mentor people. And that was the first time I felt like a male figure, took an interest in me to mentor me, to really sort of lead me along and develop me, in this case, as a scholar.
Wonderful, wonderful. So in your own life, what, if any, daily practices that you have that maybe you'd like to share that help you with challenges along the way?
Well, the first one, and I think this is one of the things that's comes from living in a world where we don't have a lot of male role models, and our role models, like a father who is either absent or maybe only has a very kind of limited emotional range, is that we actually don't know how to deal with our emotions. And so for me, meditation has been a really important practice, just basic breath meditation, to absolutely be able to kind of be with emotional energy. When I'm upset, or when I'm vulnerable, or when I'm scared, or when I'm anxious, those emotions where nobody would talk to me about, things that, I've learned to really be able to hold, when I'm in meditation. The second, which is not something that it takes a lot of practice, but I've actually learned to just express how I feel with people. Really, I think one of the things that, because we don't have these role models that say, you can express that you're angry, or you express that you're sad, or you can express that you're vulnerable. Or even the positive ones, to say, I really love you, or I think you're so amazing. We tend to think that people are going to misunderstand them, and particularly between men, that these exchange of emotions, if you're expressing any kind of just sympathy or affection for somebody, it's seen as a threat. And so I've just learned to say, you know what, whatever the consequences, if I have to sort of have a follow-up conversation, just express them.
Yeah, yeah, great point. I found that I grew up, I was very introverted and shy, and especially maintaining my role, because my dad was, basically drank every day. I mean, he was loving, I knew he loved me, but obviously he wasn't somebody I was going to follow his example in life. So I eventually found, I opened up my throat chakra and started speaking my truth. And I encourage people to do that. And I do add the caveat, speaking my truth with compassion, because just saying whatever you want to say doesn't necessarily reflect compassion. So how do you feel about that as far as speaking your truth with compassion in your daily life and in situations where sometimes it's better to just not to even do that?
Yes. Oh, it's a beautiful point. I'm so glad that you mentioned speaking your truth with compassion. I tend to be guided by the three Buddhist tenets, which are, is it true, is it kind, and is it necessary? When I go to speak, and part of that is really trying to see the world through the eyes of the other person. So I might have a truth, but it's my truth. And, when I'm connecting with somebody else, I have to think about those things. And, I try to very quickly, is it kind, is it true, is it necessary? And then think, how is this person going to receive this? What is this? What words do I need to use for this person to hear this in the way that it's intended? And that's usually how I try to go about speaking my truth and letting my throat chakra open.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. So let me ask you this, so that's my mantra, speaking my truth with compassion. And sometimes the other person really is not receptive to that or open to it, or they come back with something that's not what I would have expected or would have preferred, of course. In that situation for yourself, because I know what I do, where do you find yourself with that? Keeping your intentions good and being mindful and being compassionate and all, but somebody just lashes back right at you. How do you handle something like that?
Well, the thing that I always keep in mind when somebody starts lashing out, because it's very easy for one of us, for somebody like me to feel pained or hurt, or we're wanting to respond with the same kind of anger. We tend to kind of start mirroring each other. Is that whatever that person is saying actually has nothing to do with me. It actually is, when it comes to meaning, its meaning in my life, it really doesn't mean anything. They're speaking from their wound. That's where they are. And so I always try to remember, that's part of the building of a sense of emotional balance with meditation, is that, I'm going to feel some emotion in response to the lashing out, and I'm quickly going to say, this is their wound. This is where they're at. What they really need right now is compassion. They need love, because whatever they're speaking from is from some place where somebody else lashed out at them. They're just repeating this pattern. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Toltec philosophy is as simple as don't take it personally. It's the other person's stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That was a much more succinct way of putting it. Don't take it personally.
Well, yeah, it's easy to say. It's not always easy to do. But when we have that mindset and we really say, hey, wait a minute, this is somebody else's stuff that they're projecting on me, then we could find it easier to be compassionate and say, hey, maybe I could lend a little helping hand here, or, not take it so personally, because it really isn't about me. Because really, almost all the time, it's about the other person. We don't know what they're going through or what kind of day they had or what's happening in their lives. So that's one of my daily practices, really just being mindful of, hey, everybody goes through their stuff, and just to really be open to whatever comes my way, and they are challenges, because we all get our buttons pushed and all. So it's really it's a constant practicing of being mindful and saying, hey, we're all in this together, or we're all having a a time of it, and how can I help, this person, and it's reciprocated.
Exactly. And one of the things that I do as well is that if somebody does push a button, if it does feel personal, I make a commitment to look at that and sort of say, why did this push a button? Why is this meaningful to me? Because if it was personal, if it did hit something, it's because some part of me believed what they had to say. Some part of me is reacting to that. And so part of the ongoing commitment to this, to practicing mindfulness, is to say, when your button is pushed, take a look at that. Where is that coming from? Because then down the line, you're going to find somebody's going to say something and the button's not going to be there anymore. The button won't be pushed.
Yes, yes. So let me ask you what your take is, because, again, a lot of us, especially the work that I do is with the men. That's how I started the Way of the Illuminated Warrior, which is a program that offers men and boys a lot of the helping and healing practices that I learned along the way that helped me to feel healthy, whole, and healed. So looking back, like growing up, because very few of us had the tools innately to know how to ground and balance and to be compassionate to others. We're all in our own little worlds and all just trying to get through and survive and understand. So in your experience, taking a look back, what would you say, like, the Patrick of today would say to your younger self? Like, hey, Patrick, what would you say to young Patrick to help him out along his path?
What a great question. I would go back to the Patrick that dealt with his father. And my experience with my father, as I mentioned, he was sort of absent, but we would have these episodic encounters. Because my father was very much wedded to reason and logic, he didn't really know how to connect to us on our level. So we would sit with him in a fast food joint, and he would talk to us about his master's research about optics and electronics. Now, I'm 10 years old, my siblings are even younger. Optics and electronics was meaningless to me, but he didn't know how to connect any otherwise. But I took away one message, which is that if I wanted my father to love me, I needed to be smart. That was the message that I derived from that moment. And what I learned many years later, after going through getting a PhD, then becoming an attorney, and really learning to be smart with words, because that really wasn't who I really was. I'm not denying whatever intellectual capacities I have, but that wasn't the core of who I was. The core of who I was somebody who really, really loves the world, like deeply passionate and with a reverence for life itself. That, like, I really trust the world in its kind of complexity and beauty, the way it unfolds, its mystery. And I would say to little Patrick, like, you do not need to be smart to experience love. Actually being compassionate is your pathway to being loved.
Yeah. And the acceptance, right? Accepting yourself as you are, which so many of the times we don't do, just growing up, just the peer pressure and however we experience the love or sadly sometimes not the love from our parents, really kind of shapes our thought patterns and all. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And that pattern didn't end with my father. I mean, it became the pattern. My academic success was driven by, like, if I'm smart, that's the source of love. And realizing that actually, so many relationships that I had were built on this pattern, and to really, accept, what, that pattern is not who you really are. Absolutely. Acceptance is fundamental.
Yes. And, we hear a lot of the phrase, the sacred feminine and the divine masculine, which we have both of those qualities within each of us. And a lot of these practices are the yin, the feminine energies, the compassion, the intuition, the feelings, the emotions, and all. And as men, I mean, I have friends right now who know the work I do and who would benefit greatly from it, but they're watching the game, they're drinking their beer, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Because they will ask me on the side for a little counsel and say, hey, which they'd rather not be involved, like, officially and all. And I tell them, get in touch with your feminine side. And a lot of times, just even saying that, there's a whole stigma about that. So, maybe you'd like to speak to that a little bit, the sacred feminine and the divine masculine within each of us.
Yes. It's so important because, we do think of these things like vulnerability, receiving, sensitivity, those sorts of emotions. We think of that and compassion as being part of, the divine feminine, the feminine side. And, there's a cliche, right, of a man won't stop for directions, right, because he doesn't want to receive help. It's such a cliche. And, like as if you were somehow less of a man if he got assistance. And one of the things that we forget is that our whole life is made up of being assisted by other people. We're always in relationships where we're being assisted. And what happens, I think, with masculinity, and when we don't have role models that really show us this kind of balance, is that the masculine energy for me is an energy that wants to create. It wants to go out and build. It wants to take something, that doesn't exist and make it exist. It wants to build products and business and things like that. It's a creative energy, and it's beautiful. But, we have these stereotypes of like, businessmen who are just greedy and power hungry, et cetera. And they're really out of balance because they think that they're going to create in the world by, pushing and prodding and manipulating and, nasty, like underhanded tactics, these things like that, rather than somebody who builds from a place of seeing themselves in like deep connection and receiving from help from others. And so to me, the beautiful way to balance those is to not see them as being less of a man, but just as another way of bringing the masculine into the world. How do you create what you want with compassion and cooperation?
Yeah, wonderful. Great points. Yes, wonderful. Because we all do embody both of those attributes within ourselves, and it's really important to acknowledge that. So yeah, great point. Great point. So yeah, I'm curious if you'd like to speak a little bit about the gender and queer theory work that you were doing.
Yes. Well, when I was a Spanish professor, one of the things I did a lot of work on was, sort of gender studies, understanding how, as men and women, we are, kind of constructed. We're built by our society. There's nothing sort of necessarily natural about it. And one of the things that comes out of that is the fact that we still have a lot of stigma around, being gay. And one of those things that happens then is that the things that we associate with women, with femininity, with the divine feminine, we also associate with being emasculated or being gay. And so you see very often that when men want to express emotions, there's this fear that this is actually an indication of something that you're actually, expressing an erotic desire. And then so what happens is, out of fear of being seen that you might be gay, you shut down. You don't connect with men in that way. And the queer theory was really about looking at how that's just not true. Men should be able to express their love and affection and solidarity for other men, openly, without it being necessarily a sign, that this is a romantic relationship or an erotic relationship.
Yeah. Live and let live and do unto others, right?
Right. And what we want is for men to be able to say, I actually do love my brother, or I do love, my male friends, without it meaning anything more than that. I read a really interesting article recently about men in war. and veterans who come back. You know, we hear a lot about veterans who come back and they struggle and PTSD and, you know, the horrors of actually, you know, being in combat. But the author of this article actually mentioned that there was one really powerful way that those conditions allowed them to live, is that they had truly, really deep emotional bonds with their fellow soldiers, because it was the one place where, you know, when you're facing death, they would willing to open up. And I thought that was a sort of both poignant and kind of sad commentary on it, like that it takes kind of being in a situation like that to really open up. And I think we need more spaces, the kind of work that you're doing that says it's safe and it's okay to express the full range of human emotions that we all have.
Yeah, yeah, very, very true, my friend. It's well, within the work that I do, I'm sure just like the work that you do with others, you create a safe and sacred space. And it's a little ironic to me that, you know, that's necessary to do in specialized situations. That should be the case everywhere. That should be the case when we wake up in the morning and leave our house and you know, meet somebody on the road and, okay, they cut us off. You know, we all react to that. You know, it's like, you know, he just cut me off. Where I live, it's a metaphor for like, you're not getting ahead of me on the road. You're not getting ahead of me in life. And yeah, sometimes I'll you know, have to take a breath, because I'll, you know, almost get caught up in it. I'm like, okay, you know, wow, you know, maybe this guy's having a rough day, or he's just not in that awareness mindset. And it's very challenging walking through life that way, because there's always, you know, challenges coming in and coming out. And so that's why I think really a daily practice, a daily mindfulness practice is really essential for everyone, you know, to be able to walk with integrity and grace, and be able to, you know, be of service to people, because being of service really is the highest form of having that sacred connection, you know. So yeah, maybe you'd like to speak about that a little bit too.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I loved your image of just this, you know, the person cutting you off being a metaphor for getting ahead, right? Getting ahead. And one of the things I think that for the balance, when we're out of balance between the masculine and the feminine, is that we do look at the world as this kind of like competition. You know, I've got to win. There's only so much pie, and I'm going to get my piece of the pie, and you don't get enough pie. And you don't get any pie. You're not going to have my pie, for sure, right? My pie on my plate. And, you know, that's one of the things where we need to change the way that men and boys see the world, is that it's not a zero-sum game. It's just, you know, there's infinite amounts of opportunities out there. So, you know, when we think of service, it sometimes feels like, oh, you know, this is something where I sacrifice to, you know, help somebody else, right? And so it really, really kind of runs into conflict with this notion of like, I'm going to get my piece of the pie, and I'm going to build my thing. I want to do my thing. I'm not going to be in service to you. And what service is really about is just recognizing that, to me, all of us are so interdependent that when we create something, we're actually, and that something is something that people, you know, that we share with others, we are in service of them. And I think you can take something as simple as like, you know, take Apple, which, you know, is, you know, a monstrous company, huge company, right, that Steve Jobs created. And, you know, you might think, well, he wasn't trying to be of service to people. But in a way he was. I mean, he created his own thing, but he wanted people to have a relationship to technology where they were connected and had a certain experience. And you can do that with any kind of project or creation that you're doing in the world. You can sort of see, how am I actually benefiting and helping other people's lives? And it's just a simple shift.
Yes, great point. And the technology today is so prevalent, especially with the young people, and that's You know, it's just the way it is. They grew into it. I raised two boys, and when they were very young, same thing. You know, we had no technology Tuesday, and they were like Jones, and they're like, "Oh, Dad, when are we going to be able to go back to technology on Tuesday?" And I'm like, "Hey, if you can't go one day without technology, we're going to have like without it Wednesdays and forget about it Fridays." And
That's great.
so, I mean, the technology now, it really is. I don't want to say it's too much, but I think for interpersonal relationships, sometimes it is. And when you're texting somebody, you know, you really don't have that affect and emotion in there. And I've had the experience where somebody takes something absolutely different way than I meant it, because it doesn't have the syntax, it doesn't have the emotion behind it. So technology is good for a lot of things. I mean, obviously we're doing this through technology and it's bringing messages out there. It's wonderful. But also the technology, I think, sometimes could be limiting, especially in interpersonal relationships. You know, what do you think?
Yeah, you're right. It's both really wonderful because you can connect to so many people, and as you said, we're doing this through technology. So many people are able to keep up with each other through technology, but it's in a way we're catching up to how to interact with each other, and the speed with it means that we actually need to slow down when we write texts or interact, because it's very easy for us to misunderstand each other, and the speed with which we start communicating, you know, makes it harder to be mindful about these things. It's also tough because we have a lot more access to people who aren't mindful and who are in a place of real reactivity and outrage. You know, it's not just one guy cutting us off on the highway. It's like streams and streams of people who are feeling angry about something.
Yeah.
It's really important to kind of, you know, recognize that it's a space where, you know, you should limit your contact, because, you know, at a certain point you're just gonna slip into outrage as well.
Yes, yes. I mean, for myself, because I grew up, once I started to become more aware, I had anger issues for obvious reasons, you know, things that happened to me when I was younger that were very upsetting to me, and you know, emotions buried alive never die. So, you know, that stuff started coming out, and I knew I had to find something to be able to balance and just relieve that stress, you know. And I did martial arts, and I, you know, joined groups and you know, all that kind of stuff. And really the things that have helped me the most is really, as you were saying before, is like a daily meditation practice. And meditation doesn't have to be sitting cross-legged on the top of a mountain, because actually that's a lot easier. You know, the guy on the top of the mountain, hey, you know, the birds are flying by, the air is whispering through his hair, he's got it made. Try coming down here and living in the real world, right? They say having that daily practice for me really makes a huge difference. And so, you know, when I wake up in the morning, before I even get out of bed, it's become like a muscle memory. I offer prayers of gratitude, however that works for anybody. You know, I suggest doing it and just being grateful. Hey, I woke up, I'm alive. This is, you know, I have the opportunity to make choices and do whatever I'm going to do here to again, you know, be of service or just make the world a better place, however little thing that has to mean to you, you know, and just start the day with a healthy, positive attitude, and you know, and spread the light, you know. So that's my philosophy, you know, of being able to give back and walk that path, you know.
That's right. You know, there are two things that you said that I think were just so important and so beautiful. One is that the daily practice is like a muscle memory. It's like muscle. And it's like going to the gym. You know, when we go to the gym the first time, we don't walk out with six packs.
Or the second or third time either.
Maybe you have. But, you know, it takes time to really build up. And the same thing when you don't, you know, sometimes we get in shape and we're like, wow, I'm feeling great. I can relax now. And, you know, they've done studies that, you know, within 2 weeks, your body has really undergone massive changes when you stop exercising. It's the same with the practice. You know, just because you're feeling good, you do it when you feel good. you'll always feel good. You know, you won't always feel good, but you'll be prepared for future moments. In a way that if you only do it when you're upset, you're like, oh, I'm upset. Okay, I should meditate now. It should be a daily thing. And I think gratitude is so important because it's the energy that says, I have everything I need. There's no lack here. I'm not missing anything. I'm complete. And when you go out in the world like that, you have no idea how you impact people. You know, it's one of those things where sometimes I wonder, I wish I could see a bird's eye view of, you know, the life I have and just running into people where maybe you're just beaming a little bit with some gratitude, or you just smile because you're like, you know, I'm happy to be alive. One more day of opportunity. You have no idea what that does to somebody else. Countless people can be affected by that.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I don't know if you ever saw that movie, Pay It Forward.
I didn't see it, but I know which one you're talking about.
Oh, that's a must. It's a really, really wonderful movie, but it's just the whole concept. I won't tell you the whole thing because it really is a great movie, but it's really just out of the goodness of your heart, doing some act of kindness for somebody, and ask them, hey, just pass it along, do the same thing. It's kind of like and they told two people, and they told two people, and it's like the 100th monkey effect. It actually really makes a huge difference. And then just like you're saying, if you could, I guess be a being up here seeing how it affected and how many affected and who it affected, it's just incredible how it exponentially just, it's like energy ley lines. We all connect, and we are really all one. And the process of doing that, it's good, even scientifically, chemically, it's proved it's good for our hearts, it's for our systems and all. But you'll see it, you see it walking through the streets. People start to be happier, and people start to be kinder and hold doors open and not be disgruntled, or all that stuff. It really does make a difference. So yeah, kindness and gratitude. And how about the big F, the forgiveness?
Oh yeah, one of my favorite topics. I love forgiveness. Because, it's the hardest thing for a lot of people. People tell me, like, oh, yeah, I just can't forgive. And, the thing about forgiveness is people usually start with, like, the hardest thing, right? Like, so we've all had some kind of trauma in our lives. We've had people that really hurt us or upset us or disappointed us. You don't have to start with them. You don't have to start with the person that hurt you the most. But, as you said, I love that line that you said, emotions buried alive never die. And it's those little interactions that we have all the time where we kind of harbor them. We think just a little too big, it's a little too small for me to have some one-on-one where I kind of resolve things. Those things build and fester, and then we've accumulated all this kind of small resentments to people throughout our life, and it grows. And so forgiveness is a wonderful gift, first of all, to ourselves. It's a compassion that says, this person, I felt wounded by this. Somebody did something, it upset me, it hurt me. First of all, you acknowledge, like, I feel wounded, I felt hurt. And then from there, you can look at that and say, well, why did I feel hurt? Like, why did it mean something? Why was it a metaphor for anything? And then you can forgive and let it go. And what you're really doing is that's when you're really letting go of that pain and that suffering, but also the belief, whatever belief you had around it, that somehow it actually said something about it. And then you're in a much better position to go forward with the kind of kindness and gratitude each morning that you have. It's like clearing the slate each time, a little bit.
Yeah, it's so important too, and forgiveness really isn't necessarily about the other person. It's really more about us, because when we forgive ourselves as well as the other person, it just releases so much potent, again, chemically wise in our bodies. The endorphins and all that good stuff in our pineal glands. It just, the feel good hormones and all get released, and it's just positive all the way around. So we forgive the other person, we forgive ourselves, and it just it's healthful and healing. And they say, you know, a lot of these diseases are caused by all these bottled up emotions. Just like I was saying, emotions buried alive never die. They get to us. They start eating away at us. So, you know, so forgiving, it really is, you know, for ourselves as well. And, you know, another phrase I like to put out there is change. Well, we know change is the only constant there is, but change is inevitable. Growth is optional. So when we choose to actually grow on our paths, we're doing it for ourselves, we're doing it for our kids, we're doing it for our parents, our friends, our spouses, our loved ones, whoever it is. And it's just a beautiful way to be aware. And, you know, if we don't grow, just like a plant, we stagnate and, you know, fortunately we wither and die. So, you know, the growth process and being aware and forgiving and all this beautiful stuff like gratitude, it's essential for a daily practice, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm so glad you mentioned self-forgiveness, because we tend to be hardest on ourselves. I mean, I, for one, had, you know, and it was connected to my father, a kind of perfectionist streak, you know, like, if I don't do this, I won't be loved. You know, we have these sort of ways in which we do things, and then we really, really criticize ourselves. And so self-forgiveness is such a healing practice. And as you say, it's connected to growth. I mean, if we're not growing, if we're not sort of always looking at how, you know, doing our daily practice of mindfulness, of gratitude, of forgiveness, you know, that stuff is just going to stay there. It's built up, and you know, I don't know how, I don't remember the number, but the number of thoughts and emotions that we feel in a single day is like astronomical. I mean, we don't even keep track of it. So, you know, if we're not doing that regularly, that stuff is building. And I absolutely share your view that, you know, there's some emotional connection to a lot of physical illness. And what we don't realize, though, is that as we're doing that, and you alluded to this, when we're growing, we're affecting all the people in our lives. I mean, we're catalyzing their growth in ways that they may not even be aware of. So, you know, it's another way of being of service. You know, you're doing, you know, working on yourself, but you're really also working on everybody else too when you do it.
Yeah, very well said. Yes. You know, a little bit more about forgiveness. My dad passed 3 years ago, November, and I had let go of the anger, which I had anger growing up because, you know, he wasn't there for me. You know, it was different times. You know, the dads pretty much went out and they worked, and, you know, the mom, if she wasn't working, more likely she was a homemaker. But, you know, my dad drank every day. He was a functional alcoholic, and everybody loved him. They called him Stormin' Norman because he was, you know, he was the life of the party.
Right.
You know, and even my friends, they would, you know, go to his house and say, hey, you know, of course, first thing he'd be like, hey, what do you want to drink? You know, but being the son of that dad is very different. I didn't see him as Stormin' Norman, of course. So, you know, I knew he loved me. I loved him very much. And I let go of that anger a long time ago when I realized that he just never really progressed past a certain point. His dad had died when he was 12 years old, and he really never got past that point. And when I acknowledged that and realized that, I could have a lot more compassion for him and realize, not to be cliche, but he did the best he could do. So I had more hurt in me really when he passed because I didn't get what I needed and what I wanted from him for him to say more to me, like, I love you and I'm proud of you. And I knew he was, but I just didn't get that from him. So my temple is the woods. I went to the woods after he passed, and I just cried and I prayed and I journaled and I just got it all out. And the bottom line was I forgave him. I forgave him for anything that I wasn't happy about, because he really did do the best he could do. And it was such a release for me. And I actually felt, you know, whatever magical things happen in the universe, that he heard me and he knew it, and he was able to move on his path. Just knowing that I felt that way. So forgiveness, it really is such a powerful tool in our lives, really.
Yeah. Yeah. If I can share my father's story, I had a similar experience, which is that, you know, my father and I were very much estranged at a certain point. I learned from a relative a year after he had passed away that he had died. And, you know, that was his wish, is that I actually not be told for a year. And, you know, I thought I had resolved everything as well, but similarly, like a lot of, you know, pain and anger. And when I reconnected with this relative, my aunt, his sister, learned a lot about how his father had treated him and how he had passed away. He had passed away from diabetes and heart disease. And somebody who really felt very angry that the world didn't respect him intellectually. And I saw the chain. I saw how, you know, his father had belittled him. And then when I was with him, you know, I was trying to prove my lovability through intellect. And it was a moment where I saw that kind of lineage development where we pass from generation to generation, the kind of same issues. And I too, I had a moment where I reconnected with my aunt, went to the woods where he was kind of his one place, was able to scatter some of his ashes that were still left, and really, again, you know, really forgive, because that moment of forgiveness came when I could really see the world through his eyes and see, like, oh, this is what he was dealing with. What pain was he dealing with his father? And he didn't know how to be open and loving to me. And that was one of those moments of really letting go of you know, crying, but forgiving and saying, you know, it was his wound. He didn't know any better. And that's why it's so healing, because then you realize it wasn't about me.
Yeah, yeah. That's great that you had that awareness, because if not, we carry that with us for God knows how long. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
You
Well,
said,
this
okay.
has really been wonderful, Patrick. So I just want to ask you if you have anything that you'd like to you know, speak about that we haven't talked about.
Well, I just wanted to hit on one thing which you did allude to just now, which is, you know, wanting to hear from your father, you know, I love you. I think that, you know, for all the people watching, you know, tell your boys that you love them. Fathers should tell their kids as much as they can how much they love them, and really open up, because that's how you break the cycle. It's how you break the cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so important. I mean, that was the greatest gift of meeting the people I met and being open to tapping into my own awareness. And it's not that I, you know, intentionally, or maybe I did, said, okay, I'm going to do everything different than what my what my parents did when I have kids. But I was very, very much present, you know, raising my boys, and knock on wood, I mean, they're in their young to mid 20s now, and they're great. They're autonomous, they're authentic, they're mindful, they know how to treat their partners, and they're beautiful, beautiful kids. So that just makes me feel so good that they get it, you know, that they were open to that. And that's the most important thing, because this next generation, obviously, it's going to make a huge difference in how relationships are, and how things progress, and really in our whole society, our whole world.
That's right. Absolutely. What a beautiful, I'm so glad that you've been able to embody that for your boy.
Yeah. So this has been great. And Patrick very generously has a gift for all the viewers. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Patrick?
Yes. So you are, you know, I'm happy to provide a free copy, ebook of my very first book, When Thought Turns to Light, a practical guide to spiritual transformation. And it's a very straightforward book that talks about a number of the things that that we've talked about today, Oscar. You know, meditation, prayer, service, mindfulness generally, gratitude. So I think it's a really accessible way to sort of kind of deepen your knowledge about some of the practices that we talked about today.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So this has really been wonderful, Patrick. Thank you for sharing, you know, all your wisdom and practical methods of helping our viewers, you know, and the beautiful, wonderful gift that you're offering too. So so make sure that you click on the link that's going to be attached to this video to receive Patrick's generous gift. And Patrick, any closing words?
Well, I just wanted to thank you, Waska, for the incredible work that you're doing. I think this is absolutely fundamental, transformative work, and I'm really I'm honored to be a part of it, and I hope that it reaches as many people as possible.
Well, thank you, Patrick. I really appreciate that. So, you know, once again, it's been wonderful. So to our viewers, I hope you enjoyed today's wonderful presentation with Patrick Paul Garlinger. And be sure to click on the link to get his generous free gift. And keep tuning in. Tune in tomorrow. We have some more great interviews coming your way. And until then, be well and illuminate your path with love and light. Namaste.